Good afternoon to all of you. The webinar will start in 2 minutes. In the meantime, please note that you should write the questions in the chat. We will collect them and the panelists will address them at the end of all the presentations. Also note that this event is being recorded and we will share the recordings on our website soon. We kindly ask you as well to fill at the end of the event our short evaluation form to improve our future events. Thank you very much and enjoy the webinar. I would like now to give the floor to Luciano Saso, the UNeCC president, for the welcome addresses. Please.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. It is a great pleasure to welcome you, all of you here at this important webinar organized in cooperation with the UNeCC. So I think it's excellent that UNICA and the UNeCC got together for this very important topic of universities and culture, the impact of digitalization on culture, especially in this difficult period of COVID. I think all of us, we discovered the challenges, but also the opportunities given, in this period by all the new technologies. I really want to thank UNeCC and especially the president Flora for this cooperation. We started a few months ago, but it was really very, very pleasant to cooperate and to start these activities. I want to thank also the team of UNeCC, Edith and Eva, and the team of UNICA, Laura and Vicky. And we're looking forward today to this very important again webinar, very rich of interesting talks. UNICA, from our side, we represent a network of 54 universities based in 38 capital cities. And again, for us, it's physiological and very interesting to cooperate with the universities based in the capital of culture. So there are two different meanings of culture and I would say capitals in this webinar. And again, looking forward to the talks and the final discussion at the end. Thank you, and I leave the floor to Flora. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Luciano, and good afternoon, everyone. I too would like to welcome you on behalf of the board of UNeCC, the University Network of the European Capitals of Culture. Our network was founded in 2006 in Pécs, Hungary, by 15 founding member universities located in cities that had been European capitals of culture. Today, we have about 50 members from over 20 countries. The idea was to create a new kind of extended academic cooperation that would especially embrace inter- and transdisciplinary exchange of research on culture in a broad sense, but starting from the context of university participation in the European capital of culture of their location. Our annual conference in the ECOC of the year is normally the highlight of our meetings, but unfortunately this has been impossible for the past 2 years. Luckily, however, the University of Galway was able to set up a creative digital alternative, but you'll hear more about it from Dr. Catherine Morris. By bringing together university scholars, professionals and local authorities involved in research on the organization of a European capital of culture, we hope to contribute to the greater understanding of and respect for our cultural heritage and the diversity of artistic expression throughout Europe. More than ever, are we in need of consolidating our European values of democracy, solidarity, shared responsibility, freedom of speech, as European unity is threatened by issues such as energy supply, migration, and COVID, among others. But next to this cultural and European dimension, UNeCC also wants to ensure the recognition of the role and contribution of universities to the success of the cities conferred the title European Capital of Culture. As such, we aspire and try to inspire inter-university dialogue to develop and reshape the university's regional position in order to optimize town and gown collaboration to the benefit of the region and beyond. It is exactly this last aspect that is a shared ambition from UNeECC and UNiCA. And as it sometimes happens, as Luciano also mentioned, you need a calamity such as a present pandemic to bring people together. And it is exactly this period that has brought together UNeECC and UNiCA in this new collaborative initiative of joint webinars we entitled UniverCities and Culture. For the past 2 years, our appreciation of the digital environment has increased substantially. Hence today's webinar on culture and digitalization. We will witness the collaboration of applied sciences and humanities in different fields of music, literature, archaeology, and in the organization of cultural projects and manifestations. In any case, we thank all who participated in the preparation of this webinar from UNeECC and from UNiCA, and we wish all of you an intellectually inspiring afternoon and look forward to an active Q&A session. And I think we can immediately turn to our first speaker now. And I think as Catherine Morris is not yet with us, we can turn to Professor Demuyt, Bart Demuyt, who is director of the Alamire Foundation, the International Center for the Study of Music in the Low Countries, with its headquarters at the historical site of the Park Abbey in Leuven. He is also General and Artistic Director of Amuse, the Flanders Festival in Antwerp, and President of the Arts Advisory Committee of the Flemish Community. As Senior Innovation Manager of Musical Heritage at the University in Leuven, he will talk about his brainchild, the Library of Voices. We give the voice to Professor Bart Demuyt.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the next slide may come. Thank you. Laura, is it possible? Yes, thank you. This quote from the former Flemish Minister of Culture on the occasion of our prestigious digitization project carried out in the Vatican Library matches perfectly the ambition as well as the realizations of the Alamire Foundation, International Center for the Study of Music in the Low Countries, that I would like to present to you today. As UNeCC President Flora Carrijn already mentioned, I'm a KU Leuven Senior Research Manager of Musical Heritage in the Low Countries. I'm also General Director of the Alamire Foundation and General and Artistic Director of Amuse Flanders Festival of Antwerp. The combination of these functions is not incidental, but reflects the threefold action plan set up in view of an effective disclosure of musical heritage. Next slide, please. On the one hand, academic research at university, next slide, practice-based research at Park Abbey, where the Alamire Foundation is based, next slide. And on this slide, you can see our three buildings at the Park Abbey, the House of Polyphony at the right, the Study Center Alamire at the left, and the Library of Voices in the middle. And next slide, please. International valorization of research directed both from Leuven and Antwerp. Next slide. The Alamire Foundation was founded in 1991. Its mission is to undertake, stimulate, and coordinate innovative research on music and musical life. Chronologically, the focus lies on the period from the early Middle Ages until 1800. Geographically, on the Low Countries, including Belgium, the Netherlands, Northern France, and the Rhineland in Germany. Thematically, the Foundation especially concentrates on the study of polyphony, or multi-voiced music, a specific way of composing during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, resulting from a harmonious combination of two or more independent melodies. Next slide, please. Besides research, the Foundation has always held high the torch of valorization, by conceiving and developing useful tools to ensure that the scientific achievements have a real impact on society at large. In continuous dialogue, next slide please, with scholars and musicians all over the world, the Foundation offers a unique and leading forum for research, music practice, and culture experience in general. The 15th and 16th century in Flanders, with their unprecedented artistic and cultural life, are even today recognized as a golden age. Music flourished as never before. The soaring demand for sophisticated music in both urban and ecclesiastical contexts was met with solid financial underpinning. The Low Countries, and in particular the schools attached to their cathedrals and churches, became Europe's most important musical training ground. 2 long centuries, musicians from the Low Countries dominated continental musical life, now appreciated for the traces they left behind in the form of compositions and known as the Franco-Flemish polyphonists. They guide and define the mainstream of music history and its developments, just as the Flemish primitives may be said to do in the visual arts. Next slide, please. One important difference is that the Flemish primitives are embedded in our collective memory today. Next slide. But the Franco-Flemish polyphonists seldom are. This has much to do with the form in which their artistic productions have been transmitted to us. The paintings are often displayed in publicly accessible spaces. Next slide. Polyphonic music is passed down in manuscripts, preserved in stacks and safes, since the fragility of the material does not allow it to be permanently exhibited or frequently handled. Both cases concern visual heritage that requires study and interpretation to comprehend its language and message. Music manuscripts differ from panel paintings, however, in that they encompass an extra dimension. They act as carriers of auditory material. This is a great opportunity, but also a big challenge. Next slide, please. Cracking the codes of musical notation and converting them from image to sound is a complex process. Flemish polyphony is all too often unknown because the gulf between the source materials in which the compositions are stored and the musicians who are expected to transfer the music to their audiences is too wide. Experience showed that it is extremely difficult to fill this gap by solely applying traditional research and valorization methods. Conceived out of a fundamental concern for the preservation, accessibility, study, and valorization of our musical heritage, and to raise awareness of it in the fields of research, performance practice, education, and culture, the projects of the Alamire Foundation therefore deliberately and systematically include the development and use of high technology. Next slide, please. In order to digitally reunit manuscripts, which have often been physically separated since the Middle Ages or the Renaissance, the Alamire Foundation conceived and developed, next slide please, the Alamire Digital Lab, a state-of-the-art digital photography center for musical heritage, allowing to digitize fragile books and fragments according to the strictest quality criteria. The mobile equipment travels to institutions where the manuscripts to be digitized are housed. Next slide, please. The high-resolution images of 150 million pixels, produced with top-of-the-line digital equipment enable a new approach to primary music sources. With their unparalleled level of detail, the images allow research on the musical notation, as well as on the text, the illumination, and the material aspects of the source. Next slide. Their precision also opens the way to digital restoration of damaged manuscripts. By means of multimedia applications, they, moreover, provide access to priceless or fragile and therefore otherwise inaccessible musical heritage of the Low Countries. Next slide. To analyze music manuscripts thoroughly, right down to their deepest fibers in terms of both material and content, we created the Integrated Database for Early Music. Next slide, please. Better known as IDEM. This virtual platform is designed around the high-quality images produced by the Alamire Digital Lab and is the digital heart of Alamire Data Center. Next slide. The images or digital facsimiles stored in the central IDEM database are made accessible through the use of metadata and provided with supplementary material collected in subdatabases. Next slide, please. Subdatabases with transcriptions or conversion from original into contemporary notation, with the analysis and translations of the text in several languages, with edited and in some cases restored facsimiles of the sources, we call them fake similes, and with data as to the physical aspects of the source material, and with audio or media files integrated in a recording archive. Next slide, please. The following step in the proposed process consists of converting the notated music into sounding music in the light of an historically informed performance practice. This principle is not derived from the illusion that it is possible to arrive at a standard performance that reflects exactly how a work sounded when it was first performed centuries ago. What it is based on is the intention to develop artistic concepts that are co-determined by as many parameters as possible dating from the time when the composition was created. Next slide. The University of Leuven's Alamire Foundation has recently responded to this challenge by adding the Alamire Sound Lab to its data center at Park Abbey in Leuven, henceforth called the Library of Voices. Next slide. This combined platform has the ambition to become the world headquarters for practice-based research into polyphonic music of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Next slide. The Alamire Sound Lab features a fixed hardware setup that is custom designed and installed, and a reconfigurable software setup based on the most recent research results of the audio engineering group of ESAT KU Leuven. Its technological capacity will be improved so that it remains competitive with the international state-of-the-art for oralization systems. The Alamire Sound Lab consists of two units. Next slide. The first one is the analytic setup, and it features a digital oralization and positioning processor, a 20 loudspeaker array, and a large interactive screen. In this way, the digital music manuscripts can be directly related to the sounding music that it represents and to the individual singers who are performing. A particular voice in the source can be highlighted on the screen, while the same voice is drowned out of the musical texture. The use of audio processors makes it possible to isolate the separate voices notated in the sources and to reposition them in an acoustic and virtual space. The compositions can then be unraveled, as it were, so that the separated strands that collectively from the polyphonic texture can be studied in an experimental framework. Next slide. The second element of the Alamire Sound Lab, or the interactive setting for data exploitation, is conceived in the context of the relationship between the source, the performance, and the specific historical space in which the music in question originally sounded. Considering that many of these buildings no longer exist today or have undergone dramatic changes over the course of time, this practical research can only be carried out through the implementation of far-reaching oralization techniques. It will enable to get to the essence of these early music sources in acoustically reconstructed spaces, with an eye to a historically informed performance practice based on analysis. This is a rich and complex hot topic in the worlds of both academia, digital humanities, and performance practice. Specifically, it will thus be possible to listen to a composition of Josquin des Prés, a Franco-Flemish polyphonist, as it was performed around 1500 in the Sistine Chapel in Rome. Adding an acoustic layer to a live performance is an application of augmented reality, a hybrid mix of the real and the virtual. The Almere Foundation has thus firmly anchored itself in today's digital media culture, characterized by augmented and virtual reality that opens up new possibilities to valorize musical heritage in innovative ways. Next slide. During the metamorphosis process from hidden treasure to living heritage, the link with the original sources is, however, never abandoned. On the contrary, the materiality and the authenticity of the physical source are important factors that are constantly implemented in both research and valorization. Next slide. Digital heritage will not and shouldn't indeed intend to replace physical objects, but provides a challenging opportunity to add value to it. In other words, the activities developed in the Library of Voices within the field of digital humanities aim at establishing not as much a new, but rather an augmented reality that enables, facilitates, and promotes the conservation, study, and valorization of centuries-old historical and artistic heritage. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bart. And I think that it has already become evident that the input of engineers in the research that you are doing is very important. And this is immediately an onset for our next speaker, Miklós Jakab from the University of Pannonia. He holds degrees in bioengineering and materials science, and at present he is research assistant at the Department of Materials Engineering at the University of Pannonia. He will illustrate the input of engineering for archaeology in scanned items of museum collections, evolution of ceramic technology as demonstrated by non-destructive testing methods. Miklós, we leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much. Just a moment. So, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first thank you for the invitation. My name is Miklós Jakab, and I've been working as a PhD student and an assistant research fellow at the University of Pannonia, Department of Materials Science and Engineering since 2018. And our research team has more than 50 years of experience in silicate technology, material science, and in the field of material testing. We are currently working in our department in various fields of material science, such as nanotechnology, cement or concrete industry, bioceramics, photovoltaic systems, classical ceramic technology, and so on. Today, I would like to briefly present the development of ceramic industry over the centuries through imaging processes. This flowchart shows how ceramic are produced. The grinding of the raw material play an important role in the quality of the final product. only finely ground materials suitable for manufacturing ceramics with proper compactness or proper density. By gathering information on the elemental composition of the raw materials, we can find out the origin of the ceramics. The forming of the products has been carried out using a disc or a jigger machine for about 6,500 years. During the firing process, must reach at least 600 degrees Celsius in order to transform clay minerals into phases which cannot be further formed by adding water. Nowadays, the ceramic products are fired at up to 1,400, 1,500 degrees Celsius temperature. Earlier, wood was the main source of energy for firing, and the highest fire temperature with wood was limited to 800, 1,000 degrees Celsius. There are several testing methods available to determine the quality of ceramics, such as hardness measurement, color measurement, especially for glazes, X-ray diffraction in order to detect crystalline phases, and so on. For this presentation, imaging methods such as light microscope, scanning electron microscope, and computed tomography were used to test the microstructure and chemical composition of the ceramics. A KN's model VAG's 2000 high resolution and the depth of field corrected digital microscope was used. And the scanning electron microscope uses electron beam instead of light, and signals, the electron beam interaction, are used for imaging and analysis of chemical composition. During the presentation, mainly backscattered electron images will be presented, where the lighter spots represent heavier elements. During the X-ray tomography examinations, the sample is rotated 360 degrees, and several two-dimensional images are taken per degree to obtain a reconstructed three-dimensional model of the sample. This 3D model is suitable for visualization, the internal structure of ceramics. For example, porosity can provide information on how good was the firing temperature was, and how was the grain size of the raw materials. The most important property of the clay is the formability. This phenomenon is attributed to the fact that the clay minerals have a layered structure, and when mixed with water, these layers can slip on each other, and the clay becomes moldable. If the clay fired above 600 degrees, this layer structure collapses, and the clay will be no longer formable. The tables show the chemical composition or mineral composition of a typical clay, where the components of that affect the plasticity is kaolinite, chlorite, and illite. All investigations were performed ceramic pieces found around Veszprém, Hungary. So a Roman pottery from the 1st century, Celtic graphite containing ceramic from the 4th century, and the findings from 10th, 16th, and 19th centuries, and the modern porcelain product will be presented. Here, the first image shows the morphology of the glaze on the surface of terra sigillata. The second live microscope image shows the cross-sectional structure of Roman ceramics. And the third backscattered electron image shows the microstructure at higher magnification. It is clearly visible that the glaze does not contain any cracks, and the thickness of the glaze is only 10 micrometer. This glaze doesn't contain lead. This points to the fact that the firing temperature could have been around 1000 degrees Celsius, as otherwise this would not have melted. The 3D image of the left side shows the inclusions, which are mainly iron-containing particles. The size distribution of these particles shows that the raw materials were properly ground. The 3D image on the right side shows the internal porosity of the sample, which shows that the ceramic is properly compact. Here, static vessel contains a lot of small and shiny particles. The chemical composition of these shiny particles measured using a scanning electron microscope, and the result shows that the particles consist mainly carbon. This phenomenon is interesting because the carbon should burn out during the high temperature firing. The remaining carbon particles indicate that the firing temperature was not sufficiently high and was probably burned in a closed furnace. In addition to carbon, we also found large grains with high iron content, which can be better seen on X-ray micrograph. The size distribution of the particles is wide. The particles were not properly ground, and the low firing temperature led to a higher porosity. The microstructure of this approximately 1000 years old ceramic shows that it contains many large quartz particles. This phenomenon can be attributed again to the inadequate preparation of the raw materials. This sample was not glazed. This high porosity indicates the low quality and the low mechanical properties. The bright area of the two-dimensional X-ray image shows that the glaze may contain something which absorbs the X-ray photons. And this is the lead. More than 58% of the glaze is lead, which can reduce the melting point of the glaze up to 500 degrees Celsius. However, it is highly toxic, and due to X-ray shading effect, no 3D model could be made. This structure is very similar to the structure of 10th century product. I would like to highlight that the base material of the ceramic piece contain rare elements such as cerium and lanthanum. These are relatively rare in Hungary, so probably this product was imported to Hungary. Today, fine ceramics products are fired after glazing around 1400 degrees Celsius, making the product completely solid. And the glaze is crack-free and about 100 micrometers thick. Colored glazes are used for decoration, and these colored glazes are later fired at lower temperatures. Different colors are obtained by adding specific metal. For example, chromium yields a green glaze. Cobalt and iron give a black color. Chromium and iron give brown color, while a low amount of iron gives a lead color. The results indicate a highly developed Roman ceramic technology, while it seemed this sophisticated technology was forgotten during the medieval era. Powerful analytical methods provide valuable tools for archaeometry, and strong cooperation between academia and archaeology is highly recommended, since it will lead to better understanding of our past. Samples were provided by Laszlo Museum of Veszprém. The help museum professional is highly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miklós, for your expose. And I guess as Catherine Morris has not arrived yet, we move to I give the word to Luciano to introduce the next speakers.
Perfect. Thank you, Flora. Thank you to the previous speakers for the excellent talks. Now it is a pleasure to give the screen to Anastasia Bonch-Osmolovskaya. head of Digital Humanities Center at the Research University Higher School of Economics in Moscow, in Russia. She will give a talk on Tolstoy Digital, Objectives, Insights, and Perspective. Anastasia, the floor is yours. Please, you have only 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to make a presentation at this wonderful seminar. So I'll share the screen and start my presentation. Moment. Yes. So, hello everyone. I would like to tell you about the work in progress which are engaged during last years, and hopefully we'll be doing more in next years. And we call it Tolstoy Digital, but actually we're thinking of different brilliant people of Russian culture to be digitalized in the paradigm we're working on. So, but it also with Tolstoy. So this is initiative. Well, why Tolstoy? Which I think I will start with why Tolstoy. Firstly, because that was initiative of Fyodor Tolstoy, granddaughter of Leo Tolstoy, and I'll tell a little bit more about what she did as a start later. And secondly, well, the group of collaborators and researchers of my colleagues, we thought about just starting some digital editions in Russia, not in the sense of making PDFs of some paper books, but in the sense of building some new digital objects with all the possibilities and some kind of new dimensions and new vision of editors, commentaries, and everything else. And we started with Tolstoy because Tolstoy's heritage is a brilliant experimental stage for such new initiatives. And you can try really anything you want, really any kind of content that you can imagine you have in his heritage. So, sorry. So what is Tolstoy's heritage? First of all, it is 19-volume full edition of Tolstoy's works. Then it is Tolstoy manuscript archive, and also not only manuscript archive, but also there are photos, there are speech recordings, because Tolstoy was a big fan of new technology, unexpectedly, but yes, he was. So then there is a very interesting thing as Tolstoy's private library with his specific notes in his books, and with a specific collection which has been chosen by him himself, and also testimonies and memoirs about Tolstoy, and also research on Tolstoy's work and life, and as general a bibliography of Tolstoy studies. So this is just briefly outline of all the scope we are into. Yes, after what do we deal with? So what Tolstoy's heritage is digitalized right now? So yes, 19-volume full edition of Tolstoy's works. Yes, and I'll tell you a little bit more later. So this is our start, which we start to work with. Tolstoy's manuscript archive, partially in the museums, and also partially of his speech recordings, and everything is somehow, somehow somewhere in the internet. It is not gathered together, it is not collected in one resource, but of course there is much of it in the main resource, Tolstoy.ru, of the Tolstoy's museums in Moscow. So Tolstoy's private library, nothing is digitalized, we have just descriptions in the books, and well, partially testaments and memoirs, partially research and work, and we also don't have digitalized full bibliography of Tolstoy studies. So this is what.
Hello, Bill.
Yes. So what is unique in Tolstoy's heritage? This is the thing I would like to underline, and just because to show our motivation why we started with Tolstoy. It is very full and very complete, and it is very large. It is very highly preserved.
Hello.
Because,
who am I talking to?
Is it okay? Is everything okay? Yeah, can I go on?
Please go on, Anastasia. It's okay. Yes.
Okay. So it is very highly preserved because this preservation of everything he writes started long before he died by his secretaries. Like all his letters have been copied, and also answers have been copied and put in some safe place. So his life is known and described in details. He has a huge bibliography, but what is very, very important, all Tolstoy's heritage is free to use, because that was the will of its author. That was the will of Leo Tolstoy, that everything he has written is free to use and to disseminate. So now let's turn to Leo Tolstoy's 90-volume complete edition. So if you put all the volumes one on another, you can reach like a ceiling of an apartment. So this is a stack of books of 2 meters, of 2 and 7 meters height, and in the class all published works, variants, and published drafts, diaries, letters, fragments, and there are 13 volumes of diaries, 31 volumes of letters, and it actually makes a nice language corpus of one person. It is 14.5 million tokens. That's not a small corpus. And of course, there are commentaries and indexes. And I will just say a few words about this history of this edition. It is really, really interesting. Why do we have all this heritage? So the legend is that Chertkov, secretary of Tolstoy, came to Lenin with his idea of publishing everything after Tolstoy's death. And Lenin said that, of course, like Tolstoy was a genius, so every citizen of the new Soviet state should have an opportunity to read every word Tolstoy has ever written. And so that's following to this legend. So this publishing house of Tolstoy's full edition has been established, and they have published some volumes, but then the publication has been halted because actually Tolstoy has written a lot of things Soviet citizens should never have an opportunity to read. He criticized socialism, he criticized all parts of violence and jails and whatever. So actually his views were quite the opposite to the Stalin spirits which came at the time. So nothing has been published, and actually we should thank these few people, the editors, which somehow maintain the work of the group, and that's why we do have access to the diaries, to the letters, and to everything which has been gathered together by this team. So it has been all, the 19 volumes have been all published only after Stalin's death, but of course that's why we do have rather inconsistent editorial politics. So I will also say a few words about this later. So now we'll turn to Miklós initiative. It was all Tolstoy in one click. This was OCR initiative. So the idea was that actually this 19-volume Tolstoy edition is a very rare edition. And so, but Tolstoy's will was to give it to everyone. So why not to have it in digitalized way in all formats? But the problem is that it is rather expensive the OCR are rather expensive, the error correction is very expensive. So there was a kind of big volunteer project, and absolutely unexpectedly, volunteers from 49 countries read all 90 volumes in 2 weeks. And this showed a very, very big interest to the Tolstoy heritage, not only for specialists, but for just common people, because like common people, housewives, some people from gas stations, many different people participated in this initiative. And so this somehow inspired us to continue. And we gathered and called ourselves Tolstoy Digital. And what we started to do, we made a semantic markup of 90-volume text collection in TI format, and just made these documents, these files, accessible to anyone. And another thing which was very important of us is not to lose the achievements of critical work made by the editors. So the digitalization of 19th century philological practices, such as index, critical apparatus, text history, and also the problem of Old Russian orthography, because orthography has changed a lot after the revolution, but some of the documents which have never been printed during Tolstoy's life, they were printed precisely as they have been written, with keeping to the old Russian orthography standard. And also we wanted to have a search web interface with full functionality of filters built on this semantic markup. And we do have now a prototype of this search web interface, and you can find it by the website search Tolstoy.ru, but this is just our start, and we are going to have much more. But I will say a few words about tricky points which we came into. So the first thing, which kind of theoretical thing, but it really cost us a lot of thinking. So what is our source of digitalization? Do we deal with Tolstoy's text, or do we deal with 90-volume edition? Because actually we found out that this is a little bit different things. So this TI initiative, this TI language, is mostly oriented on reproducing material sources like books or manuscripts. But we wanted firstly to make kind of digital edition on Tolstoy based on the material of 90-volume edition, not to reproduce the 90-volume edition itself, but just to take the texts and to use all the information we have, but make it kind of another edition. But the first thing we came into was the decision between volumes and documents, because the digital edition, the 90-volume edition, just there are 90 volumes, and actually also 91st with indexes. But when we work with documents, this is absolutely kind of another logistics of document flow. For example, just the commonest example, that War and Peace takes 2 volumes. So should it be 2 documents, or should it be 1 document but somehow linked to 2 different volumes? So there is a lot of tricky things with dates interpretation, especially in diaries. I've showed some examples. Then another part of very intensive work has been connected with index, which is in traditional, as you know, in traditional paper editions is always linked to page, but we would like to link it to text span, and this link can be maybe not trivial at all. And that is, from one hand, this is difficult, but from another hand, this is very thoughtful work of the editors, which linked non-obvious things, and we don't want to lose it. And also, I've already mentioned inconsistency of editor notes and interpretations, because there is a lot of different notes which somehow interpret some Tolstoy's diaries, and actually they use different markup, different way of explaining what Tolstoy.
Sorry, Anastasia, you have 1 minute, please.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm really almost done. This is I have only 1 slide after that. So this is this is a very interesting problem also in analyzing what work has been done and trying to put it to transferred into some kind of digital way of presentation. So now what I wanted to show you is our future perspectives, which were, where are we going? This is kind of semantic map and different these different blocks stay for different components of our future map, future world of Tolstoy heritage. And so some of them, the green one, have been already done. Others are just thought about. We want to make a kind of full of ontologies, and the idea is that actually the role of Tolstoy is so huge also in Russian culture, and I think in global culture. So if we make an anthology of all the persons who have come through this big and brilliant life, so we will make actually a very good presentation of at least Russian culture of the 19th century. And also multimedia and kind of manuscripts, and everything should be somehow connected. So perhaps I will stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
So many thanks, Anastasia, very interesting. So I saw that Catherine Morris is back with us, so I give the floor to Flora.
Yes, okay, thank you. Let's put it to Brexit that she was a bit late to join us, but Catherine, we're glad to see you again. Catherine is now senior lecturer in creative writing at Hope University, Liverpool. She started at the University of Oxford as fellow, after which she became lecturer at the National University of Ireland in Galway, where she helped to found the Centre of Creative Arts Research. In 2020, she was involved in the Capitals of Culture organization, and she will talk about reimagining the digital. Catherine, we'd love to hear you.
Thank you so much, Flora. It's so lovely to see you again. I had European UK time. I had it an hour out. Anyway, many apologies, and I look forward to seeing the papers that I missed. I'm not going to use any slides. I'm just going to speak to you. So as Flora said, my name is Catherine Morris. I'm senior lecturer at Liverpool Hope University. Liverpool Hope was one of the founding institutions of the University Network of European Capitals of Culture. And as former lecturer in Galway, I brought that university into the network during its Capital of Culture that spanned from 2020 through to the summer of this year, 2021. Thank you so much for the invite to reflect on the ways in which we used a digital format to create an international conversation for this year's UNeECC conference that should have taken place in Galway. Liverpool's Capital of Culture and its legacy is so prolific in setting a high bar for emerging capitals of culture and their legacy projects. As you can imagine, Liverpool's example formed a major part of the conversation in Galway's planning. And it feels very wonderful for me to give this talk from my native city of Liverpool. And I dedicate my few words today here to the taxi driver David Perry, who saved so many lives at the Women's Hospital by his heroic actions on Sunday morning, literally just up the road from where I'm speaking from. As I say, Galway's Capital of Culture was extended through to the summer of 2021 due to the pandemic. And it's becoming, I think, increasingly difficult for us to remember life before the tragedies of COVID. But for Galway's Capital of Culture, there was a before and an after story. The former was about physical presence, while the afterworld was in large part digital. Before the pandemic, the aims were all about increasing traffic, footfall, and tracking that footfall for events in the city. After the pandemic, footfall was closer to Samuel Beckett's pared down intimacy, in that the aims were to reach unnamed audience members who were most often alone. And I suppose I just want to give a very swift overview of the planning that took place at NUI Galway for the Capital of Culture, because pre and post-pandemic, there are inspirational templates here to demonstrate how other universities might go forward in planning and in working collaboratively. So the key questions for me were really about how do universities engage with capitals of culture? And it's interesting to note how little the digital landscape for communications featured in that initial planning. So the university put place funding for university-wide research-led projects in translation and artistic practice. We joined UNeECC and gave a commitment to host that conference in Galway. I was PI on a European bid to bring artists from the European Cultural Parliament from 43 countries to Galway for workshops with cultural practitioners in the city. We wanted to establish new practice-based arts programs and launched a new MA in curating and producing. Taking inspiration from similar institutes in Liverpool and in Hull, I proposed that Centre for Creative Arts Research that Flora just referred to as a hub to bring all of those things together. And of course, just as the launch programme launched, COVID struck. And as you can imagine, everything pretty much stopped. Huge job losses in the cultural sector that had worked so hard to bring the capital of culture to the region. Our plans for that huge conference and interconnecting workshops across the city with UNeECC and the European Cultural Parliament ended. So the move to digital became a new way of thinking, but we didn't want to run a conference online. After a year of working online, as you all know too well, everyone felt drained by this experience and wanted something different, more lasting perhaps. So Patrick Lonergan, my colleague, and I decided to create a version of what the Centre for Creative Arts Research stood for in co-editing a special issue called European Capitals of Culture, The Art of Reimagining. We created a hybrid that was academic in its focus, but also included recorded conversations with theatre practitioners, European politicians, and figures engaged in transforming capitals of culture in Galway and in Rijeka during the pandemic. They were the twin cities, capital of culture 2020 to 21. Patrick described these recorded conversations as almost a way of listening in to those exchanges that take place at a conference when the academic papers stop and when that informal kind of discussion begins, a way of listening into that. So the digital forum included a range of new work. It was very important to us, and I know that that Flora and all involved in UNeECC aim for it to be a forum for postgraduate students and early career academics who are leading cutting edge research into capitals of culture and the cities in which they live across Europe. So they were really represented in a series of papers that were written up for that forum. We also included new work from that postgraduate cohort of students who were on that new MA in curating and producing and creating new work in lockdown when they were only able to access culture and exhibitions and performance through digital interface. So the work they produced was really fascinating. And I suppose some of the key things that the forum captured and that it's kind of good for us to reflect on is how incredibly inspiring it was to hear how cultural organisations like Creative Encounters in Liverpool reimagined their practice to engage local communities in making new work together online. Environmental politics suddenly emerged as a major feature of capital of culture planning. Many welcomed the change in emphasis from large-scale events in galleries and theatres in cities aimed at international visitors to cultural and arts events aimed for smaller local audiences. Participants also explored how digital sometimes created greater access to participation. And of course, this webinar is a kind of another really fine example of that. The special issue enabled us live in the moment to capture how Galway and Rijeka responded to the pandemic during their capitals of culture. So those immediate reflections that would have been lost even if we tried to capture them now they were really important to hear about how those changes impacted on the program. And interestingly, those changes were really finely attuned to some of the criticisms about how cities are becoming tourist venues rather than places affordable to live and to work in. So while it is a great achievement to bring hundreds of people to a city for conferences, for workshops, for events, as we would have done with the European Cultural Parliament and the University Network, is it the right thing to do? Often in capitals of culture planning, the actual artists and cultural practitioners can get lost in the conversation. So sometimes, some of the poorest people at the table are the artists and cultural practitioners who are not being paid for their time or the planning submissions. So the forum explored how cities want to promote their vibrant art sector. That's usually a huge disjuncture between those pathways between university training and the real opportunities for employment in cities to make new work, the crisis in studio spaces, long-term and short-term, in affordable cost of living in cities and the poor quality or indeed the lack of quality venues to show new work and to store it. So the pandemic highlighted a huge range of these challenges, and this kind of digital forum, we were able to capture how those had been raised, not just in the planning for a capital of culture, but also because of the pandemic. The Irish government, interestingly, responded to that immediately with the Artist Emergency Relief Fund. So I'll just close with this. 2 months ago, NUI Galway's online system was hacked and is still not fully up and running. So of course, the downside of creating something that exists on the internet means that it can disappear without trace if something is ransom, if something like ransom hacking takes place. So the digital in that instance becomes like a conference that we attend in person, a memory only available to those who were there. I remember when I invited Bruno Racine, who was the then head of the National Library of France, over to Ireland to give a talk about digitization of library collections. And he noted that while digitization is a wonderful, in many ways, if you want something to survive, you have to print it on really good paper and bury it in a store in the countryside. So I'll end there. Many thanks to the organisers of this event and to Patrick Lonergan, my former colleagues in Galway, and to my colleagues at Liverpool Hope University. And again, apologies for my late arrival into this forum. And I look forward to engaging further as we go on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carrijn. Very interesting. Now we move to Rome, to Italy, with Serena Ammirati, Associate Professor at the University of Roma Tre. And she will give a talk on in CODICE RATIO, when paleography meets artificial intelligence. Please, Serena, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for this kind invitation. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, yes, I cannot see it myself, sorry. So yeah, now we go. Okay, so that James Bond and a wife may not be common knowledge, but it's certainly information we can get from Google. How? Simply by asking him. We can ask Google and any search engine questions of varying complexity, such as these. Well, you can ask Alexa, which is based on the Google knowledge, but we can also ask even a more complex question like this one. Who was the Pope of the St. Paul mosaic in St. Paul Abbey in Rome? Or who was Pope before Honorius III? Or, yes, the same way as you can see. The answer, which is almost always correct, comes thanks to the processing of the information contained in the web, indexed and organized in such a way as to form a network of meaningful relationships. In CODICE RATIO was born from the ambitious idea of my engineer colleague Paolo Merialdo to be able to make available and accessible the information contained in the manuscript sources of libraries and archives in a search engine. Along this road, we are developing several tools for the analysis and study of manuscript sources. We started from the Vatican Apostolic Archive, the oldest preservation archive in the world. Among the documents preserved in its 85 kilometers of shelves, we selected some manuscripts. Which one? The registers of the papal chancery between the end of the 12th century and the beginning of the 13th century. As you can see, the Pope kept up a dense correspondence with more or less important interlocutors of the time and kept copies of every missive sent. In these pages, there is political, social, cultural, and religious history of medieval Europe, as well as, of course, lots of information about ancient documentation, recording, and writing practices. The sources, however, are manuscript and only partially digitized as images. In order for the information they contain to be made extractable, it is necessary to transcribe them into digital format. For this, it is necessary to teach an artificial intelligence to read a medieval manuscript. How? By giving the machine a lot of examples. Yes, but how? How to produce many examples in time and effectively? We tried two ways to do it. The first one is a crowd-based approach, and the second one is an advanced approach. In the first one, we exploited non-expert persons, so that means many and not skilled. They cannot read words or lines entirely, so we proposed a simpler task. They recognize symbols, not words or lines, based on pattern matching. Then, thanks to an algorithm approach, we were able to aggregate candidate transcriptions. The training of the machine is based on the refinement of two intelligence. Visual, well, I know this symbol, this is an A, and linguistic one, but because visual knowledge alone is actually not enough. You need language knowledge too, because based on your language knowledge, you can understand the real meaning of the word you're seeing here. But to get this, a lot of data is needed. So we decided to involve students, high school students from Rome and its vicinity in an orientation project, thanks to a specially designed interface, the one you can see here. The students were actually able, yes, this is how it works. The students were able to produce lots of images in a very few weeks. Then we trained an artificial neural network with the examples produced by the students, and here is the trained network. At this point, how do you go from character to text? You have to separate the lines of the text, and within each line you have to separate the words, and within each words you need to separate the letters. It sounds easy. Yeah, this is how the neural network works. But the thing is that we have realized that we cannot simply segment a word without recognizing the symbol. So we cannot recognize the symbols without segmenting a word. So the approach we decided to use to solve this problem was to over-segment the image, obtaining many alternatives. Yeah, that's the way the network is processing the different over-segmentation pattern, just as to obtain 152 candidate transcriptions, which are then schemed on the basis of linguistic knowledge. Here are the results of our crowd-based approach. And here you have a graphic representation of the percentage of accuracy of the transcription system we sorted out with this approach. Not satisfied with this promising attempt, we have decided to try an advanced approach, which is a new one we recently developed that learns both visual and language knowledge, taking the transcriptions of the entire lines of text as training data. With high quality and high volumes of training data that means lots of lines which are accurately transcribed, it produces very promising results. We teach visual and linguistic intelligence at the same time. To support the effective production of this training data, which requires the time of qualified experts, we have developed a simple yet effective tool specifically tailored to facilitate the burden of creating the training data. In this interface you see here, which is capable herself of correctly segmenting the text into lines, the expert can enter the transcription line by line. And in this way, we train a much more complex neural network. But not only. We can intervene to correct the transcription made automatically by the system, which also learns from the correction and in this way refines itself. Here you see how the interface works. So you can highlight the line where you think the text hasn't been correctly transcribed on the machine. You can put your correction in and the system learns again from this process, which is also very visually simple to see. The results are actually kind of promising. In some cases, like the one you're seeing here, the errors are minimal. This is the correct transcription, the one made by the human, and this is the one which is automatically generated by the machine. We trained the machine with just 40 pages out of 4,000 or 5,000 pages of the registers, and we train it on like several hundred of pages. So it's a small amount of starting data compared to a big amount of pages which needs to be transcribed. Sometimes you have, as I said, minimal errors. Sometimes the errors can be a little more. Sometimes there are errors which depends on the fact that the person who entered the data transcribed some abbreviations in different ways, and this happens quite frequently when you deal with very common abbreviations on medieval manuscript. Paleographer and diplomatist knows how tricky can be to maintain some sort of uniformity while transcribing the same text, especially when it is very long. So other times it happens that, there are some errors, and these errors can be determined by the fact that some abbreviations that the machine is meeting through the text is transcribing were not present in the training data at all. And of course, because the training data set is not actually very big. Well, this happens actually, the same way when you tell a child not to eat a cake, and then he eats candies, because nobody has made clear to him that cake and candies are always sugar and always forbidden. So that means that training data must always be very consistent. And even at this stage, for example, the text is actually searchable, as you can see from this little snapshot from the demo we created. So you see, I've been looking for the word provincias here, and the machine is actually able to recognize the word through the text and to give me some sort of alternatives she has elaborated. One of them is actually the good one, and this is already a tool which can actually be used to skim some text historian may be searching through. The Union of Technology and Cultural Heritage has also led us to some very nice collaborations. Here we have one with the archive of the Chamber of Deputies of the Italian Parliament for the transcription of some of the 19th century documents relating to the Committee on the Brigandage. You see, the system is the same one I've showed you before with the medieval manuscript, and the procedure you can apply is absolutely the same, and it's actually working very well. And it's actually working very well even on some tax receipts which are printed. So some unexpected spin-off of the same application, which can be useful even in very different contexts. And we also had some sort of good media echo. Google has selected our research as a showcase project for an AI platform. And we have been able to tell our experience of research in magazine, of high popular science, but also newspapers and some news reports, as you can see here. And more on, two students of our university have founded a startup to exploit the technology developed in the project. Their goal is to offer a service to automate data entry processes. Example of the problem, there are these tax documents in Italy. They are a lot, and the banks have to process them every year, quantity in terms of million of that. And our application proves actually very effective on this. We also have some next steps, which is about name entity recognition, which is, if you remember from where we started, so recognizes facts in the text of the medieval manuscript. And we also started to apply artificial intelligence to the recognitions of the hands of copists involved in the production of medieval manuscript. And there is still so much to do and learn. I would like to conclude, if I may, with this assessment. As a paleographer and a humanist, the experience of in CODICE RATIO has given me and continues to give me many ideas in the field of traditional teaching, making my students understand that our disciplines are also futuristic. Shaping a tool in the service of historical research has convinced me that properly developed artificial intelligence tools can be an asset for paleographers and diplomatists, and that none of this is scientifically effective without a constant dialogue and collaborations between us and the scientists and the engineers that are actually developing what we are doing. And that's all. Thanks for your attention.
Many thanks, Serena, very interesting. And now we move from Roma Tre to another UNeCC member, the University of Bucharest. We have on the screen Anca Dinu from the Faculty of Foreign Languages and Literatures and Center for Digital Humanities of the University of Bucharest, and Mihnea Dobre from ICUB-Humanities of the same universities. And then they will give a talk on Beyond the Digitalization, Challenges for Humans and Machines. Please, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for staying with us for the last paper of this session. My name is Mihnea Dobre. I'm from the University of Bucharest, and I'll present the first part of the paper, Beyond Digitization, Challenges for Humans and Machines. My colleague, Anca Dinu, will present the second part. The takeaway message of our paper is that digital humanities are inherently linked to culture, and that digitization as a first phase, but especially digitization as a second phase, are limited not only by the scholar's creativity, but also by finding solutions to a set of challenges. As an overview of the paper, we begin from some broad definitions. Then we offer a couple of examples of digital humanities projects at the University of Bucharest. And in the second part of the paper, we focus upon the challenges faced by humans and machines alike in the process of digitization. Digital humanities has and have received various definitions. And in the current paper, we do not want to enter those debates. We conceive digital humanities as the study of cultural objects computationally, which makes the field inherently linked to culture. More important for our talk is the distinction between digitization and digitalization. The first is taken as the conversion of a physical object, like a cultural artifact, into machine-readable format. In other words, in the creation of a digital object. Digitization comes next, and it is about the new life of the digital object. It is expressed by operations with the new object, which might include querying, editing, processing, visualizing, data mining, digital classification, pattern recognition, and so on and so forth. The digital humanities landscape at the University of Bucharest is diverse. although it is one that one of the emerging fields in our university. An MA program in Digital Humanities has opened in 2019. A series of talks and seminars on this topic is hosted by the Research Institute of the University of Bucharest since 2016. And this year we've debated a Digital Humanities Conference, which is aimed as an annual event. In terms of research projects with digital humanities outcomes, we want to highlight the very recent project on computational tools for historical linguistics, or the collaborative project with the University of Hamburg on the hermeneutic and computer-based analysis of reliability, consistency, and vagueness in historical texts. Not dealing with texts, but with images in early modern printed books, is the online exhibition of Cartesian cosmological illustrations. These are just a few examples, some of them funded from national research agencies, others from collaborations at the European level. Let me briefly give three other examples. One is the platform hosting all visual representations of the Roma population in Romanian lands, funded by the Europeana, the Archive of Medieval Sources in Romanian National Archives, funded by Norway grants, and the digitization of an archive of early Romanian Communist Party members, funded by the Romanian National Agency. Some of these projects were carried through large-scale grants, such as the digitization of the medieval sources in the National Archives, while others were completed on small grant schemes. They are offered here as examples of the interplay between digitization and digitalization, and allow us to move to the more methodological part of the paper. Therefore, in order to keep the limits of our talk, I invite Anca to present the second part of the paper, while I'll silently move the slides in the background.
Thank you, Mihnea. In the second part of the talk, I will try to summarize the challenges we have noticed and we had to cope with at the University of Bucharest during the new DH master program, the DH conferences, and the DH research projects that my colleague Mihnea just presented. I'll start with the challenges for humans. And the most important of the three of them that we've noticed is the lack of trust between humanists and computer scientists or mathematicians. We have often noticed these cases when humanists sees computational scientists as servants to create their databases, or as people who just abuse their data for senseless publications, while on the other side, computational scientists see humanists as stubborn relics from the last century who don't understand the usefulness of computational methods. Moreover, computational scientists often lack understanding for the specifics of the problems in humanities, where, as we all know, scholars have been working for centuries and gain great insights into those problems. So humanists have rightfully demanded that computational scientists respect the nature and the complexity of their problems. More than that, on the humanist sides, they don't often understand that computational approaches don't threaten their jobs or question the work that they have done so far, but instead could offer a chance to gain insights, speed up the process, and provide practical help in tasks which even themselves consider as repetitive and boring. So what's to do? What's to be done? Well, we should educate both sides to respect and gain insight from each other, because we've seen these things happening in
at least 3 or 4 projects out of 5 going on in University of Bucharest. And that was kind of a big problem to connect, really connect and understand each other, humanists and computer scientists. I'll turn now to the challenges for the next challenge for the humans, which is really keeping up with the plethora of new tools. They're just like mushrooms. Each year, we see new tools for the same field, whether this is computational linguistics or music or audio video files or whatever. Every year, something new appears. So the times when we could lecture with the same, using the same tool for like 5 years are gone forever. Now we have to adapt and to update our research basically every year. I'm doing this and it's not comfortable at all. So what we need to solve this problem is digital alphabetization on a large scale, and we need to adapt to continuous learning. So that's what we are going to do for the rest of our lives. Every day we have to learn new things because that's the rhythm in digital era. And the third challenge that we've noticed here for humans is still with us since the beginning of the age. That is gathering cultural data resources that still needs to be done by humans and manually, basically, because cultural heritage is huge. There are so many endangered languages to be recorded and transcribed and documented, or there are countless cultural artifacts to be saved, at least digitally. We've seen music, we've seen a lot of cultural artifacts that need to be digitized. So we have to do this with goodwill and with patience, because the computer really can't help us do it. So that remains a challenge for humans. I'll turn now for the challenges for the machines. As we all know, machines need machine-readable representation of cultural objects to deal with them. And the first part, the digitization part, is somehow standardized. We have TEI format for text, and we have pretty much standardized formats for audio and video. So for the machine, this is not a challenge anymore. It's only a challenge for us that we have to do it. But when it comes to digitalization, so the afterlife that my colleague Mihnea was talking about, the traditional algorithms that we use in computer science must be adapted to the specifics of cultural data, because, well, many reasons. Because first of all, and probably most importantly, problems in humanities can be extremely hard, very difficult. The main scenery we've seen in all these digital projects is that a computer scientist comes and looks at the problem that the humanist has and says, okay, let me deal with that and program a couple of months. And after 6 months, she said, okay, this problem is really hard and I need to understand it better. that's the things, how things go. Really, the data from humanities is extremely hard and extremely complex. And Mihnea is a historian and he can testify to that. So the complexity is really at another level in humanities, and computer scientists need to understand that. Another challenge for machine is that big data approaches do not necessarily work for small data. There are many cases in the humanities when we don't have enough data. This is actually the typical case. So we have to adapt the algorithms or maybe use other algorithms that are not that performant. And the last one is the black box approach, which really is satisfying for industry application, but not for scientific endeavor. We really have to understand how the algorithm or the method works in order to be able to interpret correctly the results. I'll talk a little bit about challenges for both humans and machines now. And I think it's obvious, at least from our perspective, that we need to have a computer-assisted perspective, because neither the machines nor the humans can do it alone. And what we people should do is to use the huge memory and speed of the machine and the powerful algorithms and models from the AI, and we've seen today's gorgeous examples of that, like deep learning, neural nets, to mine the digitized data. But we should do it with a good judgment. That means we should gather the data properly to begin with, like scale it and balance it, and to choose the right type of AI method or algorithm to apply. Because if you choose not the right method, you might end up with erroneous results, or you might say that it's impossible to solve. But really, all you did is just choose the wrong method. So we need to understand the methods and to discern between them. Other thing that we should be doing is to choose the right tools and libraries. That
Sorry,
means
Anca,
that yes.
Only 1 minute, please.
Okay, I'm almost done. And the most important one, I think, is interpret carefully the results, because often the correlations are misleading and other facts really explain them. So to conclude, what to do beyond digitalization? Well, as we've seen, digitization is a necessary step in the process of digitalization. So it's important to digitize the cultural objects. But keep in mind while doing that, that after that you have to digitalize them. And so you should use the tool and processes, and you should plan beforehand. So this should represent the main challenge for both human and machines. So from project design to the implementation, humans and machines have to find the perfect balance. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Many thanks, Anca and Mihnea. Very interesting. I give the floor now to Flora that will pose the question that were directed to Bart.
Okay, thank you, Luciano. Bart, yes, there were two questions for you. The first one comes from Anca, who is just heard, and she wonders, after the virtual sound is obtained from the material, what kind of processing can be applied? And can the search for patterns eventually lead to identifying authorship of one or other unknown piece of music? And a second question, she adds, is it possible to import aspects of computational linguistics techniques into what you are doing?
Thank you, Flora, and thank you, Anca, for the question. I think the research we are doing in the interactive Alamiri Sound Lab in the Library of Voices has nothing to do with looking for patterns, because of the fact that we do not record the music in the lab, but it has everything to do with the practice of centuries ago. Because for us, acoustic is one of the parameters for a composer to compose, to create a polyphonic piece. And for example, I spoke about Josquin des Prés. He died 500 years ago this year. So he composed the beginning in his career. He composed in the north of France, and there he composed in a different way. If we compare it with the composition he made in Rome when he was choir master in the Cappella Sistina. So it's not only because the composer is at that moment more mature, but we think that it is also because of the sound, how must I say it, the acoustic where he is writing for, because the chapels or the churches in the north of France, Cambrai or Douai as examples, are totally different. The acoustic is totally different there than the acoustic in the Sistine Chapel. So the research we are doing in the Alamiri Sound Lab is really focusing on the practical research if acoustic is doing something with the way of performing a piece that is composed 500 years ago. So we combine different techniques, but I think the computational linguistic techniques, we do not combine it in this research. We have other research that we are doing together with the engineers of ESA at KU Leuven, where we are working around analytic issues together with the computer, but that's another stuff, and that's nothing to do with the Library of Voices.
Thank you very much. I think it's very nice to think of this parallel, because authors, I work with text, and authors, writers and musicians express themselves in different ways, but I think there is something there to just look at the methods in computational linguistics, which is really a well-established domain since 60, 70 years. And you might have some nice ideas to use in music, because writing and music is not that different. And I was not talking only about patterns. You could study the trends or the evolution of a musician, or you know, with the computer you can have surprising results.
Yeah, sure. That's
okay.
True.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Okay, we have a second question, Bart, which is I think both a practical question, more practical, and opportunist question from Laszlo, who wonders, first of all, how long did it take to build the infrastructure? And I suppose he also implies how much did it cost? Yeah. Yes. And secondly, is there a possibility to process invaluable old materials from other countries in your lab?
Yeah, sure. So the Alamiri Foundation is 30 years young this year, and since 2010 the study center started their activities at the historical site of the Park Abbey. The Mother Queen opened the House of Polyphony in 2012, and the Library of Voices saw the light in 2018. So it's very, very young, our lab there, and we have offices the study center, and they opened at the beginning of this year. But focusing on the Library of Voices, we built the Library of Voices. You have seen an image of it. It's a gatehouse of the Park Abbey, and it was there 10 years ago. It was there it was nothing. It was not restored, and so we invested 1.2 million to do a restoration for the building. That was the first step, and then with the money of a strategic basic research project of 1.8 million, I invested all the equipment for doing this. For starting this lab. So and our team at this moment is 30 people. So some people are focusing on the Library of Voices, but other people are focusing on the valorization projects and so on.
Okay,
maybe the second part of the question, sorry for that, Flora. All the music and the material we digitized in the last more than 14-15 years is always related to the Low Countries. So some of the material is in Flanders itself. A lot of material is in Brussels in the Royal Library. We have a structural collaboration with the Royal Library in Brussels, but a lot of the manuscripts, a lot of the printed books with music from composers from the Low Countries are in other places in Europe and also in other parts of the world. Some manuscript or books are in libraries, prestigious libraries, little libraries, but also we can find also some manuscripts in private collections.
So let's hope that Laszlo Komlósi will find some of these examples in Hungary again, because yes. we shared the Hungarian Habsburg nation, so it might be able to find medieval musical pieces in Hungary. So Laszlo, look for it and get into contact with Bart.
Always welcome, yeah.
So thank you, Bart, thank you, Flora. I don't see other questions in the chat, so I encourage participants to ask questions. In the meantime, I have one for Anastasia and Serena. So thank you again for your excellent presentations, very interesting. What can we expect to find as breakthroughs, as very important discoveries in the near future about Tolstoy, or about these kilometers of shelves of the Vatican archives, thanks to these technologies? I mean, is there something that really people now are starting to use, and we can expect again some important discoveries in the near future? Thank you.
Okay, I will try to answer that. Thank you, Luciano. That's a very interesting question. And actually, I would not think of it as some kind of technological achievement, but maybe as kind of socio-communicative achievement and cultural preservation of achievement. So what we've seen, and what I showed, that cultural heritage is now the point of much interest to a lot of people, and I think one of the impact of this project is to make this knowledge kind of more, I don't know, democratic, so to say. Yes, not only for experts, not only for specialists, but for anyone, and to make it kind of user-friendly for anyone, that for anyone could find something interesting without much efforts, without going to the library, without feeling this pressure of some environment which is not, for which he or she is kind of stranger. So this is the first thing. this is like, we're going to call it dissemination of, but not of the new ideas, but the ideas of old ideas, but they should not be forgotten. And I think that's a very, very important thing in digital preservation of cultural heritage, that it is really kind of opening of doors which have been shut to most of people not involved in specific professional cultural activities. So this is the one thing. Another thing, which I don't know whether it is kind of technological breakthrough, but for me, I think it's rather rather important step forward, is that somehow we will introduce the new kind of thinking of textual interpretation and criticism, not over a book which is like which is always kind of, kind of box where your opinion is put in and it is closed, yes, but of some kind of lively system which can be developed and enhanced. And even if we start with this 90-volume edition, we hope that we will also introduce a lot of more sources, and also maybe some new experts will come and maybe rethink some of the interpretation. And this is the very fundamental thing for the humanitarian knowledge, that it is always an argument and always a discussion. And what we do, we just make it a little bit more speedy, as everything now in our century. It will be more quick, it will not take a lot of time just to publish a book, to read it, and then to publish your response. And it will also be accessible. This discussion will be accessible to everyone. So that's a kind of social input, not even technological input. Thank you.
Thank you. And Serena, would you like to also comment?
Yes, yes, just a brief comment. Well, we don't really want to go through all the 85 kilometers of shelves of the Vatican archive. This is just, that sort of provocation that we used to say to make people think, how many things there are in such an archive to be known. I guess that the main goal at this moment and the main target would be the scalability of our researches. So it's not that we will find something completely new. Well, we always find something completely new if we study manuscripts and documents and books with continuity, as we do in our traditional humanistic ways. The fact is that now we can actually process a huge amount of text in a very shorter period of time. So I have the transcription of an entire register from the Vatican archive, like 1,400 pages, which the machine transcribed in like an hour. It would take me months to do that for a qualified person. The transcription I have is not a very good one. As you see, there are some errors, there are some problems, but still it's something I could work with. And one big advantage is already typed, which is, you don't underestimate how time consuming is to type down something which is handwritten from the original, from your screen, from your images. So this is time saving. And all this time you have saved in processing a rough version of the text can actually leads you to ask yourself different questions on a different scale, which is something that we don't dare to do because we know how time consuming is to work, on the original. So first discovery I would say is the fact that we can ask ourselves different and new questions based on the fact that the data are more scalable. The second one is that in this way, we can actually work in a more appealing way on these sources, even for the new generation that are, you know, like born digitally born, and they're not used to the frequentation of libraries the way we do. And this is actually a way we can raise their curiosity. So it's in my class, for example, this is a tool I use to get my students curious about my job and to tell them that my job is futuristic, as I was saying. So it is not, you know, an old-fashioned thing that you do. It's actually a new thing, and there is so much to do, and there are so many expertise you can acquire and so many new jobs that you can get from this sort of experience. So from speaking for myself, this would be the main goals of such project as the one I presented now. Yes, and then of course there is the historical research, but
thank you, Serena. And then there is also more work for you, because Anca is asking you if your technologies can be applied to Romanian texts as well, the old ones.
Yes, in principle it can apply to every language, because as long as you have you know, a language database which you can give.
Yeah, I had a more specific question. Yes. Because we have this problem in Old Romanian that the diacritics were not standardized, so the same sound was written in many different characters. So that's a problem that I guess you didn't have with your Italian text. So I'm wondering if that could be adapted or...
Well, I guess that there are margins for adaptation. I can tell you that we've been training the machine on Latin, and it worked perfectly on the, you know, late contemporary Italian too, where sometimes the orthography is not so standard as the Latin ones. So at the beginning we thought we use Latin because it's formal, the texts are very formulaic, the abbreviations are so. But then the same system work with documents from the, as you see, from the Italian Brigantage Committee, where you have, you know, standard Italian text, but also you have some reports from the witnesses which speak, you know, some sort of southern dialect or so. So it actually gave us some good results there. So with I would call them minor adjustments, but I will have to ask to the engineers.
Okay.
Maybe we can have a try on your text.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Serena and Anca. I don't know, Flora, if you have other questions for the panelists.
I have one last question for all panelists, in fact. You know, being a cognitive linguist, I'm very much interested in communication and dialogue. And I would like to go back to an issue that was addressed by Anca, and that is how to bridge the gap between two worlds. We have an engineer among us, we have people from humanities among us, and the projects all involve the combination of technological aspects and humanities. How did this communication happen? Was it fluent, or what were the difficulties?
Maybe I can start. I have, I can just say fluid, very fluid. But quite an important issue is that we have some engineers also in all boards. So it's really coming together, the world of the humanities and the world of the engineers. So, and it's working very well. I'm very, very happy with the result and very, very happy with participation and collaboration.
I suppose, Flora, if I go next, just hearing kind of the different papers and the conversation, it reminded me as well that in Galway, they digitized the archives of the National Theatre of Ireland, of the Abbey Theatre, and you know, and of the Gate Theatre, and they're beginning with others. And that is, it is utterly transforming to research. You know, for one article on European drama and the Abbey Theatre, I could look over 1,700 documents where if you were to go into the archive with one archivist, you would have to travel to the city, one of the most expensive cities in Europe to find accommodation, very difficult. And you wouldn't be able to access it. So actually, even I didn't know the argument or that I was going to make when I was writing about Heaney's version of Antigone in the Island in Europe series. But when I began to research, suddenly I could realize that actually you can look back at, administrative, discussions with the European Parliament about theatre and Europe and the emergence of that whole thing, as well as the text, as well as the reception. So you quite quickly, just as Serena and Anastasia were saying, quite quickly you can look at a range of materials very quickly. But in some ways, going back to a point that Anastasia made, that is the National Theatre Archive that has been digitized in Galway. So that's a very national kind of outward looking thing to do. But you have to still go to the library to access it on a series of computers. So the idea of copyright or access in many places, not just Galway, is quite complex. And just going back to that point in terms of the fact that the digitized, the way that we set up the that forum, that special issue journal, when something is hacked or when systems go down, we lose a lot. We lose time, but that sense of access is also very fragile.
Okay, it reminds us of verba volant scripta manent. This is something of all ages, I guess, but also in the digital age. I would like to address Miklós, because you as an engineer, I wonder, when you say that you found out that the materials in the water jug were toxic, and how did that reverberate to the archaeologists and the historians? Could they use that and find it in the context of the things that they had found?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? The first part was the glaze on the surface of this ceramics contains lead, which is toxic. And the second part of the question, what was it? Sorry, I just don't understand it. Please turn on your microphone.
The fact that you found that was toxic, what did the archaeologists or historians do with that finding? Could they relate it to their knowledge of that period or not?
I think not. So it's toxic when you use it for holding water in these ceramics. So the lead can dissolve from this glaze.
Yeah.
And when you drink this water, it becomes toxic. So
yeah, but it could be
not hazardous or anything. Just
yeah. They didn't relate it to demographical things. Well, that is an example that perhaps further dialogue with archaeologists would be able to solve then. Eh? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have.
I think, please, Serena, we just have a couple of minutes, but please go ahead. Then we have to close. Please go ahead, Serena. Yes.
I asked Miklós in private. I forgot to put it on the general chat. If they found out some traces of ink over the ceramic they were analyzing in this way. Yeah, sure. We can measure ink on any type of surface by using a scanning electron microscope. For example, in a backscattered electron image, you can see black spots if you see ink, and you can measure the chemical composition of the ink too. So, but I haven't seen any ink under the microscope yet, but I will try it.
So thank you. I think we need to close. But Flora, your last question was very interesting, based on what Anca said, and on the necessity of actually bridging the computer scientists and the humanists. So I think this is homework for us, universities in UNICA and UNeECC, because this is actually our job, to make training and studying more interdisciplinary, and give the possibility to students actually to have a more general and again transdisciplinary education. So I think this is not easy, of course, because now all subjects are very difficult, and of course the knowledge is richer and richer. But I think that is the challenge. I think we need to close now. So from my side, many thanks to UNeCC for this very good cooperation, to Flora, and all the team, Edith and Eva. I also saw the members of the board, Bill and Laszlo, online today. So thank you to all of you. And also, of course, thanks to UNICA, to the team in Brussels, to Laura Colò and Vicky Xonka. And then many thanks to the speakers. They really gave a very good and interesting talks, and to the participants for being online, with us for 2 hours. And Flora, over to you again.
Well, I can only advocate what you said, Luciano. It was a very wonderful experience, this first webinar. And I think we also have to mention not only the wonderful work of the speakers and of the people of the two networks, but we also have to thank the participants. And I cannot forget, Laura, that we have to mention the questionnaire to the participants, where they can give their review of their experience, and also, and this is something that we would like to stress, in the cooperation between UNICA and UNeECC, we would indeed appreciate new suggestions for a next webinar, because the idea was to see this as the first of a series, and hopefully we get a lot of responses from you. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your evening further. Luciano, bye.
Bye-bye, Flora. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.